This past Shabbos, I made a Siyum on Maseches Chagiga, and I kept it pretty short because people don't have much patience by the Kiddush. But here's the extended Siyum. So at the end of Chagiga, it talks about it says Talmidei Chachamim are impervious to the fires of Gehenna because their bodies are like fire, and we learn from a salamander, a Gavachaimer, the fire-bred salamander is impervious to fire. People who have the blood of the salamander on them are impervious to fire. So we learn from there. It's related to the Mizbeach Hazav, which had only a thin layer of gold, and it never burned, which was a nace. But we see that the Mizbeach Hazav is mechaper. So also, let me just double check. No, that's the next thing. So then Rish Lakish says that the Rishraim of Yidden are impervious to the fires of Gehenna because the Mizbeach Hazav only has a thin layer of gold on it and doesn't get burned. So the Rishraim who are full of mitzvahs, like a pomegranate full of seeds, don't get burnt. So I wanted to learn something. Go back to the middle of the Masechta. Talks about Ma'aser Merkava and Acher, the story of Acher. And I'm no big rabbi, let alone tzaddik or anything, but the same way the Rebbe talked about Miriam Bas Bilga and made a whole thing about her, and you could say that he was sort of arguing her case in Shemayim after all these years. So I don't know what Acher deserves or not, but Acher was a Talmid Chacham, and it says at the end, towards the end of the story, it says when Acher died. I'll get back to the other stuff, but it says when Acher died, it says that they didn't know where to put him because they couldn't put him in Gehenna because he had to learn Torah. They couldn't put him in Elam Haba because Gan Eden because he did all these averes. So it's like he had the fire. I mean, if you go back to the end of the Masechta, it says the Rishayim can't go to Gehenna because they're full of mitzvahs. So what happened to Achaz mitzvahs? So the Taichas over there says that it can't mean all the Rishayim because then who would go to Gehenna? It can't just mean that it's for the Rishayim of the Goyim. So he says so here's a bit of an adult issue, but here's your warning that it says Avram Avinu took all the Rishayim out of. It says only people who go to Gehenna are people who are Paishim Vikufan, and it says Avram Avinu took out all the Rishayim from Gehenna, except those who had relations with an Aramis, because Shem Moshcha Le'ar Lasei. Now I'm not sure exactly what that means, because what does one have to do with the other? But it looks like he's saying that Avram Avinu was very connected to Bris Milah. So someone who goes with a Aramis, and I don't know whether she literally is Moshcha Arlo or not, or it's as if she did or he did. But that's basically, and that's the first thing that Acher did when he was confused and came out of Pardes, was that he went to Zaina. So maybe she wasn't. I don't know. It doesn't say whether she was Jewish or not, but so that could be sort of your niggle digger answer as to why. But then you go into how do you deal with a guy like Acher? I mean, Rabbi Meir says Rabbi Meir wasn't his student exactly because Acher wasn't a Rebbe because he was already a min, but I mean, it says Rabbi Meir says you have to learn from everybody. So Rabbi Meir was like the sieve in Pirkei Avos. He's able to learn, take the wheat away from the chaff and drop the chaff. So he's able to run after Acher and learn from what he's from his Torah, without being susceptible to his practice. So, and even then, so Acher used to say some Torah, and it had to do with either it was just was either it wasn't necessarily related to Acher. Sometimes it was related to being in Russia. And Ramirez said, you see from this pasuk or wherever that you're learning, it was a few times that the Rishonim can do tshuva or something similar like that. And he said, do tshuva. And Acher said, no, they told me in Shemayim that you don't want anything to do with you, and basically in different forms. And there's different psukim that he learned. So Acher was a Talmid Chacham. He knew everything back to front, and he argued. He argued that way. Now, why did he argue that way? So I don't. I don't know. We don't know what kind of temperament, what kind of mental capacity. He obviously was a brilliant genius, like all of the Tanaim on those days, and relative to us. But same way we know nowadays that we don't even know how to learn the hilchachas of Ma'abed Athmai L'das, because we don't understand how that can possibly be without the guy personally being mentally ill, or basically halachically shaita patur kol mitzvahs. We don't know how to apply it nowadays, because the only place that actually practically happens is when someone's so far down that rabbit hole that they're basically patur from anyways, because they're in too much pain, they can't handle it. Not to excuse it. I'm just saying we can't judge, and we just have to be mikar of people. So how do I'm saying that it's possible. I'm not saying it is. I think it's possible that Acher was at the same relative place in his head. So when Acher was arguing against Reb Meir, saying that he's too far gone, he's just gonna stay the way he is, was this use of hard talking, but he was so burdened by the way he went, and by all that he couldn't take himself out, even though he knew all the answers, and Ramir was pushing him. But I guess Ramir wasn't he wasn't. I mean, Acha wasn't destined to do tshuva. He says by a guy like Parai that Hashem hardened his heart. He didn't let him do tshuva. But the Yidden, I mean, I don't want to learn that Hashem didn't want him to tshuva. Ramir tried to get to do tshuva, and he didn't let himself do tshuva. Now I'm arguing that it's also possible. Even that was that he was so far in that he couldn't cut his losses and just say, fine, I'll do tshuva. He couldn't do it. He couldn't bring it to do it to himself. So we see when he died, that Ramir who was close to him, Ramir maybe Ramir was from the psychology of Shammai, and he couldn't. He was basically all do it or don't do it, and you're a bad guy, and can do tshuva. And maybe he was, I don't know. I don't want to say against Ramir, but maybe he was like from the psychology of Shammai, and Ramir made a smoke coming out of Acher's grave. And then Rabbi Yechanan was maybe more of a chesed. Rabbi Yechanan, when Rabbi Yechanan died, he took Acher out of Gehenna or something, and they stopped being smoke. So Yulish Leimar, that similar thing could be argued about Acher. I just wanted to put that out there. Have that be said.